I keep messing with my mouse here. Just leave it alone. Okay. Let us call this meeting to order then. This is the Friday, March 5th, 2021 meeting of the O'Hare Noise Compatibility Commission. I'm getting a clicking sound. I'm not sure who's causing that. Let's make sure.
Just muted them.
Okay, great, thanks. Let's make sure we stay muted unless we need to speak. So let's kick off the meeting with our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Item 3 on the agenda, it's a little unusual to have an agenda item before the roll call, but this is with respect to our intergovernmental agreement renewals. Right now, we're in the process of collecting all the signed IGA documents. And currently we have 51 signed IGAs, which includes the City of Chicago and 6 Chicago wards, and 10 IGAs are pending and 5 have not responded. So that's the roster of our 66 members going into this year. Somebody's got more than one speaker on because I'm hearing feedback. All 66 members are welcome to participate in today's meeting, but we'll only take roll call for members who've approved the IGA. Remember, the deadline was February 28th. However, we know that there are some in process, and Jeanette is reaching out to the 5 who haven't responded. So members that are approved their IGA after February 28th will be allowed to vote at the next ONCC meeting in May. So for sure get that in so that
I believe there's supposed to be 9.
I just muted that person.
Okay, will be voted back in at the next ONCC meeting in May. So Jeanette, will you please call the roll of our currently signed in members?
Village of Addison. Arlington Heights.
Here.
Bartlett.
Here.
Bensonville. Bloomingdale.
Here.
City of Chicago.
Here.
City of Chicago 36th Ward. 38th Ward.
Here.
39th Ward.
36.
40th.
36 is here.
Okay. 40th. 41st.
Here.
40. 45. Des Plaines.
Here.
DuPage County.
In the chat, and
Elmwood Park.
pull that
Here.
out. And
Franklin Park.
Here.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt. By now we should all know proper Zoom etiquette. Please mute yourself unless you're responding. Thank you.
Glenview.
Here.
Hanover Park.
Here.
Harwood Heights.
Here.
Hoffman Estates.
Here.
Lincolnwood.
Here.
Mount Prospect.
Here.
Niles.
Here.
Norwich.
Here.
North Lake.
Here.
Palatine.
Here.
Park Ridge.
Here.
River Forest.
Here.
River Grove.
Here.
Rolling Meadows.
here,
Schiller Park.
Here.
South Barrington.
Here.
St. Charles. Stone Park. Wayne. Wooddale.
Here.
School District 2. 7.
Here.
48.
Present.
59.
Here.
63. 84. 84 and a half. 85 and a half. 86. 87. 89. 100. 214,
Here.
234,
Here.
and 401.
Here.
We have a quorum, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Jeanette. So our first item is to vote on approval of the January 15th, 2021 ONCC meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for approval?
I'll move so.
Okay, that's Dennis Ryan making the motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Wooddale.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Are there any additions or corrections? And indicate in the chat or waving frantically at the camera. And I see no additions or corrections. Jeanette, in accordance with the Open Meetings Act, during the emergency declaration, we do have to take a roll call vote on all items that we're voting on. And I forgot to mention that Jeanette is attending the meeting as our executive director at the CDA offices. So Jeanette, please call the roll.
Village of Addison. Arlington Heights.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Bentonville. Bloomingdale.
Yes.
City of Chicago.
Yes.
City of Chicago 36th Ward,
Yes.
38th Ward,
Yes.
39,
Yes.
40, 41,
Yes.
45. Des Plaines,
Yes.
DuPage County,
Yes.
Elmwood Park,
Yes.
Franklin Park,
Yes.
Glenview,
Yes.
Hanover Park,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes.
Hoffman Estates, Lincolnwood,
Yes.
Mount Prospect,
Yes,
Niles,
Yes.
Norridge,
Yes.
North Lake,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Forest,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Rolling Meadows, Schiller Park,
Yes.
South Barrington,
Yes.
St. Charles, Stone Park, Wayne, Wooddale,
Yes.
School District 2, 7,
Yes.
48,
Yes.
59,
Yes.
63, 84, 84 and a half, 85 and a half, 86, 87, 89, 100, 214,
Yes.
234,
Yes.
and 401.
Yes.
Thank you.
the minutes are approved. We'll go on to today's presentation. As you all know, we try to have a spotlight featured presentation at each of our meetings in order to expand our knowledge base and our relationships with the aviation community. And today we're very happy to have two representatives from the Federal Aviation Administration who are going to be speaking with us about the Neighborhood Environmental Survey. It was released in January, and I'm so pleased that the Zoom platform, with all of its technical issues, has allowed us to get representation from the FAA so quickly after the release in the Federal Register. Just as a point of information, the ONCC did respond to the request for comments, and a copy of our response was emailed to members earlier this week. So we have with us today Mr. Sean Doyle. He's the FAA Senior Aviation Noise Specialist in the Office of Environment and Energy Noise Division. He joined the FAA in 2016 and brought nearly 10 years of technical consulting experience at airport and airspace related environmental projects. Sean is an expert in aircraft noise modeling, and he works closely with multiple lines of business within the FAA to coordinate research policy and outreach activities. He is joined by Mr. Don Scotta. He's the manager of the FAA Office of Environment and Energy Noise Division. Currently, he manages the FAA's research and policy development regarding aircraft noise effects on individuals and communities, noise modeling, metrics and environmental data visualization, and noise reduction, abatement, and mitigation. Don's job is to address challenging questions ranging in topics from the new supersonic aircraft to unmanned aircraft systems to advanced air mobility aircraft. Formerly, Don coordinated FAA's international environmental activities, including work in the International Civil Aviation Organization Committee on Aviation Environmental Protection. Prior to joining the FAA, Don worked as an aviation management, aviation planning, and environmental consultant to meet the needs of FAA and airport clients worldwide or nationwide. So we have two very qualified individuals who are able to join us today, and I want to welcome you both, gentlemen, and look forward to our conversation now. Are they here?
Thank you, Arlene, for the introductions. So
Great, thanks, Sean.
Sorry. So I'll be leading the briefing, and then Don and I are happy to answer any questions afterwards.
Great.
We've prepared about a 20-minute overview briefing, and then if we could hold questions to the end, I'm happy to keep answering any questions after that you might have. So I can just kick it off. Let me share my screen. And can everybody see the slide deck?
Nice.
That's good. Okay. Great.
Yes.
So today I'll be talking about our recently released noise Federal Register notice, which provides an overview of FAA's noise program at large, as well as a focus on the recently released Neighborhood Environmental Survey. So to put a little context, the Federal Register notice was released and provides a general overview of all the programs we have going on. The Neighborhood Environmental Survey is a key one of these programs, but it's part of a broader portfolio. As one of the major features of going out in the Federal Register notice, our goal is to get public comment on the NES, or what I'll call the survey, as well as those research programs. We've done this because we understand that aircraft noise has been and continues to be a challenge. And as part of our research program, we're always looking for ways to better inform things that are informing our decision making, and even more importantly nowadays, looking to get that broad input from communities and other stakeholders on the activities that we're exploring. A key component of this is, again, continuing that collaboration, because as you all know, there's no one solution to noise. It's really something that requires a broad approach and brings in a lot of different input from many different factors. So today's briefing, like I said, I'll go over our research program, talk about the survey, and then some of the next steps that we have looking forward beyond that. So one of the other things I wanted to mention with that as well, just quickly, in addition to our research program, we've also been in the recent years really trying to engage communities and find mechanisms to do that better, both to communicate research activities as well as program activities and other ongoing things related to noise. A key component of this recently was hiring community engagement officers that work closely at the regional level to provide a better conduit between communities and the FAA. We're working with airports in like today's session, reaching out directly to community groups and roundtable groups to try to communicate and address any questions people may have. Within our air traffic organization, we're also looking to provide better information on the procedural changes that are being introduced. We know that continues to be a challenge for many, and we're continually looking for opportunities to help explain some of those features in whatever capacity we can better. One of the things I think close to our activities in the Office of Environment and Energy is sharing some of the research activities we have going on. Today I'll touch on them, but there's a lot of different things that a lot of may not be in as much awareness out there that we're engaged in that really contribute to this broad portfolio. And lastly, we have our regional aircraft noise and community involvement web pages and the noise portal we've recently launched, which helps better communicate for folks that may have complaints or other concerns with noise. So to kick off with our research program, we've largely bracketed the program into 3 different groups, which have been described in the Federal Register. the effects of aircraft noise on individuals and communities, noise modeling, noise metrics, and environmental data visualization, and reduction, abatement, and mitigation of aviation noise. So in the first category, we have a long-standing effort looking at speech interference in children's learning. Some of this work goes back all the way to early work that was done by the EPA in the 70s, but we've been looking to still keep in touch with that to inform some of the research priorities we have. The Neighborhood Environmental Survey, which I'll go into more depth in a minute, is again a key component to our portfolio. But even beyond that, we have a lot of work emerging now looking at the potential impacts from the cardiovascular health from aircraft noise exposure, as well as work looking at sleep disturbance, including a national sleep survey we'll be launching in the near future. Additionally, we have work looking at economic impacts, because looking broadly across all of these things, the trade-offs and different kind of ways noise can affect communities is really a broad base on both these health and economic issues. Next, we have the noise modeling, metrics, and environmental data visualization area, where predominantly we have work looking to inform our Aviation Environmental Design Tool, or AEDT, which is the required regulatory noise modeling tool for assessing project actions. Additionally, we're looking to improve the capabilities for our noise screening process, which helps us quickly inform things where a noise impact is not expected, but we need a quick and efficient tool to rule out that possibility. Increasingly, with technology emerging the way it has in recent years, we're also looking for better ways to visualize data. One of the key components to communicating noise to the public and communities is being able to show it in a way that's graphically meaningful and helps us describe some of the situations and project actions that we encounter. AE is invested in some technology to look into that, and we're continually looking for input to find better ways to communicate noise and changes in the airspace. Lastly, we have work looking at supplemental noise metrics, including a report to Congress we recently submitted last summer. But this is an area where there's been a lot of interest, and we're continuing to look for opportunities to explore further. The last group, reduction, abatement, and mitigation of aviation noise. This is where we're really looking to find ways and help invest in technologies to reduce noise at the source, to find ways to make aircraft quieter. The main place we have effort here is something through our CLEAN program, the continuous low, sorry, I always mess up the acronym, but it's basically a public-private partnership where we try to find ways to find ways to bring technology to the market faster that can reduce noise. And it's shown a lot of success, and it's been a popular program, and it's led to some direct benefits. Additionally, we have noise abatement work to look at ways how procedurally we could reduce noise from an aircraft flight profile point of view, as well as noise mitigation research, looking at things like our sound insulation program. So for the rest of the core of the rest of the briefing, I'll move on and talk in more detail about the Neighborhood Environmental Survey. But I wanted to start a little bit about why we, what was our motivation to conduct this survey? And predominantly is the FAA, like I said earlier, recognizes that aircraft noise continues to be a challenge. And with our longstanding program, in looking at these impacts, we decided that it'd been a while since a survey like this had been updated, and that it was time to reassess and look in a contemporary view what some of these responses were. The last time the US government had done any review of an annoyance survey was back in 1992, where the Federal Interagency Committee on Noise, or FICON, reassessed what we call the Schultz curve, which I'll talk about a little later, which is basically based on surveys conducted in the 1970s. FAA's overall goal was to obtain then updated information about the way that people are perceiving noise, again, in a more contemporary picture. So as an overview, the Neighborhood Environmental Survey had two key components. The primary component was a mail survey that went out to just over 10,000 people living around 20 nationally representative airports, and looking for their response, their annoyance response to aircraft noise. Additionally, of the 10,000 people who contributed to the mail survey, they were invited to take a follow-up phone survey, which 2,000 people volunteered to participate. The phone survey asked a larger range of questions, but because it was a downsample and an elective downsampling from the people that were statistically sampled for the mail survey, it's useful but not as robust in its conclusions. So the dose response relationship I'll talk about in the next slide and show a presentation of is based only on the mail survey. So which won't come as much of a surprise, the results show that there's been a substantial increase in annoyance in this updated survey compared to the surveys that were conducted in the 70s that have informed some of our policies to date. The other key thing to remember, though, is that while these results of the survey bring forward the new data, that while we see this difference, we have seen that they are consistent with some of the other surveys conducted in Europe. We feel our survey is probably a broader, larger sample than some of those surveys, and is also taking a look domestically at US airports, but is consistent. So we believe that these results are highly accurate. Okay, so next I want to talk a little bit about the methodology that went into the way the survey was constructed. And so in the upper right, you'll see that at first we looked out across all of the airports in the country and did a down selection where each airport initially looked at for eligibility had to have at least 100 jet operations per day, at least 100 households exposed to DNL 65 and above, and at least 100 households exposed between DNL 60 and 65. Going out and surveying around every airport in the country would be prohibitive. So this initial down selection provided 95 eligible airports to review. From that, we then had to down select further, but to do so, we used a technique called balanced sampling. So initially, 4 airports were selected due to their national significance, but of the remaining 16, we looked to sample them in a balanced way to represent the conditions that would reflect a national representation. So the image on the lower left here shows the 6 criteria that were used to assess that balanced sampling, where we looked for regional distribution by selecting at least 1 airport in each of the FAA's regions, the CONUS regions. We looked at temperature variation to make sure there was a balance between airports that were average temperatures above 70, between 70 and 55, and below 55 degrees Fahrenheit. We looked at nighttime operations percentages, as well as the number of operations occurring per day, so that we get both large and small airports included. We also looked at fleet mix ratios, as well as the number of people in the vicinity of the airport. In this way, we were sure to get a representative picture of the nation as a whole. So in total, the airports that were selected are shown here in this image. As I said, 20 airports were selected, and while even for the airports that were not selected, because of the way they were sampled, the results I'll show in a second are representative of all airports in the country equally. You notice in your region, Chicago was selected as one of these airports. But again, you'll see on this list that airports of all sizes and types were selected to give that representative view. The next on the survey itself, this slide will show some information relative to the question that was asked. Before I talk about that, I want to talk a little bit about the sampling and getting into the statistics a little bit. One of the core components was making sure that we were sampling in a way that would get us responses across a range of noise exposures. And so you'll see in the chart on the left shows our distribution, where we looked in 5 decibel bins between 50 and 75 to make sure that we had sample in all those areas. So as you get to the higher noise levels, what we find is there's just less people living in those noise levels. So you'll see the sample go down as the noise goes up. However, all of those noise levels were represented and used to form the final result. The slide on the right shows the question, or a summary of the question we were asked. So one of the things that's hard in surveying is to control bias. You don't want to ask something that may lead somebody to answer a certain way. So to help control that, the survey was issued on Department of Transportation letterhead as the Neighborhood Environmental Survey. And in addition to a question on noise exposure, a variety of questions on environmental factors one might encounter in a neighborhood were asked. So things from like noise from cars, or even smells, or other environmental factors in excuse me, in a neighborhood environment. The core question was asked that thinking about the last 12 months or so, when you are home, excuse me, when you are here at home, how much does each of the following bother, disturb, or annoy you? Respondents were asked to rank each of those questions on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being least annoyed, 5 being most annoyed, and then responses of 4 or 5 considered highly annoyed, which I'll show then how that was plotted in a minute here on what's called a dose response curve. In addition to the mail survey, which these questions were asked, like I said before, there was also a phone survey I'll talk about at the end, where additional questions were asked that got more at the reason, trying to understand more about the reasons of why people were annoyed, in addition to how they were annoyed, how much they were annoyed. So one other aspect I wanted to talk about on this slide. So from the survey responses, we get the response. But to understand and get an accurate representation of the dose or the amount of noise exposure, we went through a detailed noise modeling exercise. It actually happened in 2 phases. The first was based on 2012 and 2013 inputs to inform the initial sampling. So they show there were the 5 decibel bins that we made sure that they were sampling adequately in. The initial modeling helped inform where the people lived in each of those 5 decibel bins. But to ensure that the noise that we were considering lined up with the same time frame as when the survey was issued, so in the 2015 timeframe, we went back and remodeled all the noise for the 20 airports in that matching 2015 timeframe. This modeling is done in a very detailed way that brought in flight track data to inform actual conditions to get as accurate representation of the noise around each of the 20 airports as possible. And the results from the work are then shown here. So quickly on the slide on the left is shown the Schultz curve, or sometimes referred to as a FICON curve, which is the representation of the dose response relationship that we've used to inform our policies to date. This curve is again based on information collected in the 1970s, reassessed in 1992. The curve on the right is our new national curve produced as a result of this survey. The main color band in the middle is the national curve. The dashed lines represents what are called the 95% confidence intervals, which from a statistical point of view, if you were to conduct this survey 100 times, 95 out of 100 times, that central result will fall within those bounds. The shaded regions beyond that represent the range of dose response curves for each of the 20 airports. The main national curve is the primary objective of this study and is the statistically represented result. However, to produce it as an incremental step, we produce dose response curves for each of the 20 airports. The range of those curves is then showed in the light blue shade. So a little more on the phone survey. Again, the dose response relationship I just showed is based completely on the mail survey. But to help get a better view of why people were annoyed, in addition to how much they were annoyed, we conducted the phone survey. So again, while informative, the findings don't have the same statistical robustness, but are valuable in their own right to help understand a little bit better about why people are annoyed, and then maybe help inform some directions that we could go in the future to explore this in more detail. About 90 questions in total were asked, so it was a very detailed review. But after taking all of that and going through a statistical process, we found that respondents who replied to being startled, frightened, or awakened by noise most highly correlated to their annoyance. Additionally, those who responded as being annoyed by general traffic noise or smells also showed a degree of correlation to annoyance, but far and away, startled, frightened, or awakened were given as the primary reasons, or correlated the primary reasons for people being annoyed. So taking this one step further, really trying to think through what this means, that we've seen a substantial change between the dose response relationship in the 70s, collected from surveys in the 70s, to what we have today in our new national curve. We wanted to explore a little further what some of the factors behind that could be. A key component of this is going to be collecting input from the public to help us inform that. And a big part of the Federal Register notice is trying to get the input to understand what other factors may be out there to consider. But to help guide that, we've put together a few ideas that we think could definitely be behind some of this change. And it's things like population distribution. We know that there's been airport encroachment since the 70s. So with more people living closer to airports, that could be a factor. The survey methodologies is also probably an aspect of this. We don't think that is probably a primary aspect, but the way that our current survey was conducted used modern techniques, both in noise modeling to get the dose, as well as surveying techniques to get the response. There's also potentially been an overall societal change in the way people respond to aircraft noise that could be a factor. How people live and work has changed since the 1970s. But also, maybe more dominantly, the way that aircraft are operating has changed. In the 1970s, we had far fewer operations, but each aircraft was much, much louder. Today, we have the opposite, where there are far more operations, but each individual aircraft is much quieter. So looking forward, how will the FAA then take these findings from the survey, and what are our next steps? So it's important to know that the environmental survey provides data that quantitatively shows that a substantial increase has occurred on people's annoyance, and then it's important that we look to consider this further. The other thing, though, to keep in mind is that we have to look at this, we're amongst all of our research to help understand it better. While we show that there's an increase in annoyance, trying to understand why and then what actions we could take to help address that is going to take further review and understanding, as well as input from communities. Again, like I said in the beginning, we have our impacts research, which we hope will further inform this. So looking at impacts to sleep and cardiovascular health. We don't intend to wait until those research activities fully mature because they're still going to take some time. But we feel that they will play a role in helping ultimately to find ways to address the noise issue better. And again, that's always because there's no one way to address noise, and this broad portfolio is critical to helping look at all the opportunities and possibilities we may have to understand this better. So for immediate next steps, as I said, we've published a Federal Register notice with the main goal, again, being to collect input from stakeholders and the public and get their impressions of our research program as well as the findings of the survey. A key thing to mention there, though, is that while the results of the survey are very important to helping inform our priorities, which may lead to will lead to a policy discussion, in itself, is not a policy statement. There's no policy changes advocated or put out at this time. But we feel that a national discussion on the issue is critical, and hope that the survey, as well as the results of the survey, as well as discussions with communities, will help inform that. So as of right now, we have the Federal Register notice open for a 60-day comment period, currently scheduled to close on March 15th. After the period closes, we'll look to review the comments and help to look for overall themes and try to understand, broadly all of the input we've collected. And then beyond that, we want to go back out and really engage communities and stakeholders to talk about what we collected in the Federal Register notice and look to see where we take the discussion from there. And throughout this process, making sure to keep stakeholders engaged. So lastly, looking at specifically what kind of input we feel would be useful and we're hoping to collect through the Federal Register. We've posed three main questions. Any input can be made to the Federal Register notice, but we thought that input on these three main questions would help be most useful to us. But largely looking at what factors that may be contributing to an increase in annoyance, similar to the slide I showed earlier. What additional investigation, so looking at the three core components of our research portfolio, but are there other things that were not addressed, they're not provided there that warrant further review. And then beyond that, even what additional categories of investigation or analysis would be warranted? You know, are there broad areas that we're not addressing in our portfolio that anyone feels should be included to help inform priorities and policy discussions? I will say too that we've put together a website at www.faa.gov/go/aviation noise that provides a lot more information on noise in general, as well as a survey, and has links to both the Federal Register notice as well as the detailed technical report from the Noise Neighborhood Environmental Survey. So lastly, if you haven't had a chance to make a comment yet, this slide just provides a little bit of a highlight on how to do so. Again, you can start by going to that website at www.faa.gov/go/aviation noise. On there, there'll be a blue bar with a link to provide your comments. We'll send you to the Federal Register notice where you can read the whole notice, but there's also a big green button to submit a formal comment to the federal docket. We encourage everybody that has any opinions or thought on this to please go to the Federal Register and make a comment. You know, all of those will be read and brought in and summarized to help inform our thinking on some of these next steps. Additionally, if you have any questions that you know, again, would not be part of the docket, but just general technical questions you'd like to pose to us, we've set up an email address at noiseresearchfrn@faa.gov where we welcome you to submit any questions that we'll try to turn around to you as soon as we can. So with that, I'll close the presentation, and we're happy to take any questions you have.
I have a question.
Okay. And
this
please
is
identify yourself.
Yeah, this is Nunzio from Wooddale.
Hi.
You said something about you're also going to be conducting a national sleep study in the future. I could tell you that's some of the biggest concerns and complaints I receive from my residents. I'm just curious, when would
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, and we recognize that sleep disruption is a core concern for many. So we've partnered with the University of Pennsylvania to design and conduct a national sleep study. It's currently in the process of review. Anytime the federal government goes out to collect information from citizens through studies, a exhaustive review process has to occur. We're in the throes of that now, but expect probably in the next year or so we'll be launching that, going out and collecting data for that sleep study. Further information on that can be accessed. We can provide further information on that. I can find the right links to send to you.
Other questions?
Yes, Frank Ikas from Chicago 41st Ward, please.
Frank?
Mr. Doyle, I wonder if you could, for a few seconds or minutes, discuss or compare having a conversation with someone in an area that has a 65 decibel background noise average versus a conversation with someone in a 65 DNL background noise environment with operations approximately every minute going overhead.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time? The difference between a 65 decibel and a 65 decibel DNL?
Yes, with operations at about a 1 minute interval. This is real life experience here in Chicago.
So before you answer that, Sean, let me amplify on that because it's one of the comments that we put in our ONCC comments, which is DNL is a great way to measure things over time, but that in fact, in an instant, you experience under a 65 DNL far greater decibel levels that impact you in a sporadic way, but then which get factored into a 65 DNL. And I think Mr. Ikas is trying to talk about the incidence of 65 DNL or 65 decibels versus a 65 DNL, and how do we model the impacts of these short bursts of high decibels?
No, good question. I think acoustically we'd say that is looking at what the maximum noise level from an event is, or we'll call it an Lmax noise metric versus the cumulative day-night level noise metric. And so you're right, the DNL is taken to be a cumulative metric to provide kind of that average sense of what the noise is over an extended period of time. We use that to inform our policies because it gives us an equitable way to look out broadly, given all the different conditions that might occur through the course of a year. But you're right that a single event noise level, could register or does register on a meter as higher. So, looking broadly, one of the things that we're interested in getting comment to the Federal Register is if anyone has ideas or concepts on how that's affecting them or suggestions for how that could be better addressed, we're welcome to take those into the Federal Register. When you're looking to answer your question directly, how does the experience compare? I mean, I know it's a bad answer, but it depends. So like I alluded to in kind of contrasting the things that were happening in the 70s versus today, where you may have the same DNL, but it can result from either a small number of very loud events or a large number of much quieter events. So, that given DNL level you can get to that given DNL level in a variety of ways. So as we look at this and collect people's concerns, hopefully through their comment in the Federal Register notice, it's definitely something we want to look to understand. Again, we need to find ways to help inform our policies in an equitable way that speaks to all the conditions that might occur. But we're certainly open to considering all of people's thoughts, and if reviewing other metrics in specific situations is warranted, it's definitely something we're interested in considering.
Can I ask a follow-up question then? Are the number of operations per minute or per hour ever considered into your equation? In the annoyance factor, no one I've ever known has been annoyed or angered by 65 dB noise. But everyone is annoyed or angered by an 85 to 90 decibel noise overhead from a plane coming in every minute or minute and a half, or sometimes every 45 seconds. The stacking at these large airports, the stacking of the aircraft coming in, makes it nearly impossible to use any outdoor space in your living area, in your home, outside. And that affects us for 6 months out of the year. Having a 747 taking off, going east, and then bank to the north because they're going to Europe, and they're at an altitude of about 2,400 feet or less, and that's above sea level. And Chicago is 600 feet above sea level. So you can imagine a large body aircraft under full power trying to get up in the air, which they have every right to, by the way, I agree. But the noise is significant. It is unbearable. It stops everyone in their tracks when it comes to conversations or attention span or anything else. So, and thank you for listening to us.
So Sean, I think that indicates the complexity of what you and what we are trying to accomplish here. There are so many dimensions. I know in looking at our own fly quiet procedures, there's a debate whether we should use vector headings or RNAV, because RNAV comes with its own set of unintended consequences. As you concentrate the noise, it means those under that concentrated noise are more adversely affected. So is there a process in place to sort of guide you and us through this whole complex analysis?
So again, I mean, as you're alluding to, I mean, there is no single way to address noise, and it's looking at it broadly, from a research perspective, making sure that we're looking at it in all the ways that we need, but then having that national dialogue on this, which we hope the comments to the Federal Register will be, kind of a real strong kickoff to that. We're trying to understand broadly all of the concerns to review this, in all its facets to help inform some of these next steps. But as you said, noisy is a complicated problem. And getting a full picture of all the concerns across the country is critical to that, as well as then continuing that dialogue and discussing it with people to help make sure that we're not inadvertently leaving out anything that needs to be reviewed or considered.
Great. So as you probably know, we have a great collegial and collaborative relationship with Chicago Region FAA. Regional Director McPherson has gone above and beyond, I think, in terms of making sure that we keep a close collaborative and professional level of discussion going on. And we'd certainly volunteer the ONCC to be a partner with the FAA in any ongoing additional research. And we like the idea of maybe coming up with a community collaborative working group to help discuss these things going forward and drive us towards results. I am wondering, so it's good that I like the way you did your what I'll call stratified random sampling. That's what I used to call it back in my electric modeling days. And so I understand your results are very statistically significant on a national level. But the results for O'Hare, are they statistically significant in any way, or would understanding the results of the survey respondents with respect to O'Hare help the FAA or the ONCC?
So I'd say the body of research in total relies on the whole ensemble of the 20 airports. So statistically, you know, the more sample you have, the more robust your answer is. So while I wouldn't say that, you know, each individual airport, you know, as a result is not meaningful in some way, it really shouldn't be the focus of where we look to inform any kind of decision making. Because statistically, you know, we need all that sample to have that full representative picture. You know, one thing we are doing and did as part of the technical report is to look to see broadly were there conditions that were unique or situations unique across airports that might have influenced the way that the noise response turned out. So there is some things that we can continue looking at there, but you know, looking at each airport's dose response curve is not really the focus or should be the focus of any interpretation from the body of work.
Any other members have questions? I have one, and it's actually related to a different part of your research, which is childhood learning and speech development. With so much remote learning still going on in homeschooling versus school building schooling, I know we've done a great job in Chicago of insulating all of our schools in the 65 DNL. But I would just urge the FAA to think about the fact that so many children are not learning in school buildings right now, but at home. And so that learning aspect has an important feature to be to consider, that it's being delivered in the home rather than in a central school building.
No, that's actually a very compelling point. I mean, something we can definitely take back.
Great. Any other questions? Well, thank you for taking the time to address us this morning. I think we should all feel very comfortable. I know we were very frustrated with how long it took to get this out, and we won't ask you all the reasons why, but it's clear that the FAA did seek to do a statistically important, statistically significant set of analyses here. And it's a great framework to start again looking at additional research and additional solutions potentially to address these newly outlined noise concerns. So thank you very much. You know where to contact us. We know where
Absolutely.
to contact you. And I want to encourage our own individual members. You are welcome to submit your own comments on behalf of your entity that you're representing, or even as a private citizen with the links that are provided in today's meeting notice. So thank you. I appreciate you being here.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, let's move on then to the report of the City of Chicago, CDA. We'll hear from them about the January 21 ANMS report, and then an update on interim flight quiet. Ryan?
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone see the January 2021 monthly report?
Yes.
Good. So pages 1 through 3 provide a background and overview of the operation levels and noise levels for the month of January 2021. On page 1, we have our operation summary based on the FAA's air traffic activity data system. You can see that for 2020, we closed out the year at 538,211 operations, which is a 41% reduction from previous year 2019, obviously due to the historically low operation levels as a result of the COVID-19 impacts. For January 2021, we had 38,238 total operations, which is 46% below January of 2020. January 2020 was just before we started to see some of the impacts of the COVID-19 as it affected the airline industry. And historically, January and February tend to be our lowest month of operations at the airport. So this was not too much of a surprise as far as operation levels. Page 2, the top of page 2, we have our wind summary. The diagram in the upper right summarizes the percent of wind occurrences by direction. As you can see, the majority of winds for the month of January were out of the west-southwest, a little bit of the north. As a result, the airport, because wind is the one of the key factors in influencing which direction air traffic is using on the runways at O'Hare, the airport operated in a predominantly west flow configuration. 61% of the month was in west flow versus east flow, 39%. As a result, our most used departure runway was runway 28 right, with 44% of the operations, as well as 28 center for arrivals with 31% of the operations. Bottom of page 3, we have a summary of our total complaints by month, updated for January 2021. December, we saw 17,211, ending the year at 245,711 total noise complaints. For January, we had 15,713, well below what we saw in comparing to January of 2020, obviously correlated to the historically low operation levels. And we'll go into more detail on complaints at the complaint report towards the end. Page 4 is our aircraft fleet mix report. The fleet mix report takes all the different types of aircraft that operate at O'Hare and breaks it out into our 3 main categories: regional aircraft, narrow body aircraft, and wide body aircraft. The report shows average operations per day as well as per night, and percents. So we see regional aircraft continuing to be the predominant aircraft type operating at the airport, representing a little over 51% of the operations. Narrow body aircraft, 33%, and wide body aircraft, 14.5%. We're looking at, in January of 2021, an average operations of 1,128 operations per day, and 8% of those are occurring during the nighttime hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. Page 5 is our runway use report for daytime between the hours of 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. The runway use report shows the average daily departures and arrivals, as well as the percent utilization of each runway end. As I previously mentioned, the airport was operating predominantly in west flow. So as you can see, our west flow runways were the ones with the most utilization. For departures, that was 28 right, 45%, as well as 22 left with 16%. On the arrival side, we saw 27 right with 14% arrivals, 27 left with 15%, and 28 center with 30%. New runway 9 center, 27 center, as we have discussed in previous meetings, that runway was commissioned in November of last year. However, it didn't really start seeing significant operations until last month, February 1st, when we closed 9 right, 27 left for construction for the extension. And that construction will occur throughout the year with the goal of being completed by the end of this year in December. And while that runway is closed, 9 center, 27 center is seeing the operations that would typically have gone on 9 right, 27 left. We don't have any showing here at the January report because, as I mentioned, that runway didn't really start to see operation levels until February. So the next report at the next meeting, we'll have some new numbers there for 9 Center, 27 Center. Page 6 is the runway use report for nighttime between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. For nighttime for January, we were still in the interim flight quiet runway rotation program, which continued throughout the month of January. So we saw a little bit of more dispersion on our runways during the nighttime hours, especially on the crosswind runways. As you can see on the departure side, we see some departure operations on 4 left, as well as 22 left. On the arrival side as well, those crosswind runways, we see more operations with 22 right arrivals, 3%, 4 right arrivals at 3%, as well as the 28 Center and 10 Center. Page 7 and 8 are our noise monitor reports. Page 7 is the geographic location of all 36 noise monitors around O'Hare. Page 8, we have our aircraft DNL report for the first 17 monitors. For January 21, you can see the column where we have numbers highlighted in green or black. Green represents a decrease of 1 decibel or more from the same period of the previous year. So comparing to January of 20, you can see the majority of sites, if not most of all of them, are at least a decibel or more reduction corresponding to the low operation levels. We had to exclude data for site 17. For the month of January, we found that there was a construction activity nearby that was impacting the site's ability to record aircraft noise levels. So we'll keep an eye on that construction, which hopefully will be soon, so we don't have to exclude more data. Page 9 is our remaining sites. Again, January 21 updated with aircraft DNL values, average DNL values for the month, comparing to January of last year. As you can see, majority are at or below a decibel level compared to that period due to the operation levels being so low. Page 10 is our noise complaint report for January 21. The noise complaint report shows the number of households that made with verifiable addresses that made noise complaints through one of the CDA's methods, whether it be website, the app, or the telephone. For the month of telephone right on cue. Thank you very much. For the month of January 21, you can see highlighted in red the number of verifiable addresses that made complaints, as well as the previous 2 months for comparison. For the month of January, we saw 173 total verifiable households that made noise complaints, slightly down from December and November. That does correspond to the lower level of operations compared to those months as well. For total operations of 15,000, or I'm sorry, total complaints of 15,713. In the lower right, we have our breakout of method of complaint, whether it be through the website, app, or telephone. As you can see, the majority of the complaints were made through the city's website. The nature of complaint, 86% were in regards to aircraft noise, and the time of complaint, a little over 85% was during daytime. The complaint was made, while nighttime represented 14%. Page 11 shows the geographical location of all the verifiable households that made complaints in the month of January. As you can see, there's a little bit of a pattern that matches the flow of what the airport was in for January. As I mentioned, we were predominantly in West Flow. And as you can see, east of the airport, majority of the complaints are kind of in line with our arrival corridors. coming from the east, as well as on the west side of the airport. You can see a little bit more of dispersion as a result of departures. We also have some complaints in line with our crosswind runways. That would have corresponded to the interim flight quiet rotation, where we were using those runways more during the nighttime hours. So no surprises for locations of complaints for the month of January. And that completes the report for January 2021.
Questions for Ryan? Thank you, Ryan. Aaron, how about IFQ update?
Good morning, everyone. We finished the IFQ at the end of January. So we are back in some form of normal fly quiet, although, as you know, we've added and subtracted runways. We are preparing a final IFQ report for your review. We had previously done sort of a first half sometime last summer or last fall. And then we resumed in September and ran the IFQ through the month of January. So what we'll do is prepare a total report looking at both IFQ periods and then bring that back to Fly Quiet Committee at its next meeting. Mayor, are there any questions about that?
Questions, anyone? So just to reiterate, we're done with IFQ because of construction.
We're done with all tests and we're done with all IFQ.
Right. And that's why it's so important now that we focus on Fly Quiet, which we'll hear from Joe in a little bit, to make sure we've got a Fly Quiet program once the construction is done. Okay, I don't see any questions, so we'll move on to my report. And first, the 2021 UC Davis Aviation Noise Symposium. You've heard about this every year from us. And while I did not attend this year's symposium, Karen Robles, Evan Summers, Jeanette Camacho, and ONC staff were able to attend several sessions. It was done remotely. So I'll ask Karen to give us a brief report and some highlights. Karen?
Mayor, the UC Davis Aviation Noise Symposium was held virtually during the last week of February. As Mayor Jurasek mentioned, several of us attended the 4 days of panel discussions. Topics covered included overhead aircraft noise dispersion, COVID recovery, the impact of aviation on health issues, advanced air mobility, climate impact from emissions, aircraft technology for reduced fuel emissions and noise, legislation for aviation impacted communities, and understanding aircraft noise regulatory policy. The biggest takeaway from the symposium was that ONCC is doing all the right things, especially when it comes to community involvement, building consensus, and balancing aircraft dispersion. The symposium panelists said, in general, aircraft dispersion is easy to get if everyone is willing to share the load. Community designing is a better way to reach consensus when the FAA, the airports, pilots, and the community all work together, and everyone sees it as the best way to do things when considering the constraints. In general, ONCC has always had a good working relationships with our aviation partners. In these last few years, the Fly Quiet Committee has worked to build consensus for a balanced nighttime noise dispersion over the O'Hare communities. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Karen. Evan, anything to add?
Thank you, Chairman. The only thing I would add is that our Fly Quiet rotation map did make a couple appearances throughout the course of the week. So that was exciting to see, but the work we're doing here with Fly Quiet is definitely cutting edge. So everyone should pat themselves on the back for that.
Yeah, I think, the fact that Regional Director McPherson and I were on a panel together last year kind of illustrated both our relationship with our professional colleagues, as well as a good showcase for how you get a good community group to be involved in a very meaningful way. So we learn always from these things, but we also help educate others as well. Any questions on the symposium? Okay, let me move on to just a reminder that we do have an ad hoc nominating committee. I want to thank Mayor Sherwin for once again offering to chair that committee for selecting the 2021 slate of officers. And they had their first meeting yesterday. So I want to thank John Kunkel, Brian Gazer, and Peter Bialik for serving on the committee. I invite any members of the commission to submit nominations for members to be considered for our offices. to be elected at our May annual meeting. You can send those through Jeanette and she'll make sure that they get to the right spot. So thank you all for engaging in this very, very important process for continuity of leadership and continuity of our good work. Let me move on to the standing committees and ad hoc committees. And we'll hear today from Joe Annunzio, Chair of the Fly Quiet Committee. It looks like there has been significant progress made. We're moving along in our little flow chart of things to do. And Joe, take it away.
Thank you. The Fly Quiet Committee met twice in February. At our first meeting, we reviewed the 7 alternatives and voted and advanced 2 of them. Those are alternatives B and H. At our second meeting in February, we began the next step to review and revise alternatives within B and H. We looked at suggested modifications of B and H from past meetings. CDA presented proposed vector headings overlays on maps of population densities. As a starting point, this led to many questions, but all the members agreed to move forward with alternatives B and H. This will be a very complex journey as we revise and refine the alternatives. For clarification, we'll be relabeling these different sub-alternatives like B1, B2, so forth. There will be some offline meetings with CDA and committee members who want a better understanding of flight headings. Fly Quiet Committee will not meet in March, but on Thursday, April 22nd at 9:30. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Joe. I did listen in on the last meeting and I want to applaud everybody for the constructive conversation that went on. I think it really moved the ball forward in many important ways. And I stress the word constructive. There was a real effort made to improve alternatives rather than to just simply shut an alternative down. And I appreciate that effort. Any questions for Joe? Okay, let's go to Jeanette's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to report the finances for the month of January 2021 in the amount of $19,801.80 and the month of February in the amount of $13,792.60. Are there any questions?
Questions? If not, I'd like to have a motion to approve the financials for January and February.
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
Second.
Evan, and we'll say Ryan seconded. And let's take the vote.
Addison,
Aye, yes.
Arlington Heights,
Yes.
Bartlett,
Yes.
Bensonville,
Yes.
Bloomingdale,
Yes.
City of Chicago,
Yes.
City of Chicago 36th Ward,
Yes.
38,
Yes.
39,
Yes.
41,
Yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes.
DuPage County,
Yes.
Elmwood Park,
Yes.
Franklin Park,
Yes.
Glenview,
Yes.
Hanover Park,
Yes.
Harwood Heights,
Yes.
Hoffman Estates, Lincolnwood,
Yes.
Mount Prospect,
Yes.
Niles,
Yes.
Norwich,
Yes.
Northlake,
Yes.
Palatine,
Yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes.
River Forest,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes.
Rolling Meadows,
Yes.
Schiller Park,
Yes.
South Barrington,
Yes.
St. Charles, Stone Park, Wooddale,
Yes.
School District 2, 7,
Yes.
48,
Aye.
59, 86, 214,
Yes.
234,
Yes.
and 401. Thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, the financials are approved.
Thank you, Mayor. The next meeting will be held, which is our annual meeting, May 7th at 8 a.m.
Great. It'll be our first remote annual meeting, it looks like, unless we can get 100 people in a room together, but I kind of doubt that by then. But good luck to everyone on their elections, which will be held between now and then. And it'll be an interesting meeting with some change coming into the organization. Are there any final comments from any ONCC members?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Frank?
Yes, from 41st Ward. I would like to encourage everyone to take that poll or survey at the Federal Registry notice that Mr. Doyle alluded to. It's an opportunity to voice our opinions and give some accurate information that they might not otherwise get. So Jeanette posted the link to it on the ONCC website. So it's easy to find, easy to manage and maneuver your way through it. And it only takes 5 to 10 minutes of your time. So I would encourage everyone to do that. Thank you. And thank you for having the FAA rep here today. It was nice. It was very informative.
Well, we can thank Jeanette for scouting them out and convincing them to come. Just to
Thank you,
clarify,
Jeanette.
those are comments on the report that are being solicited in the Federal Register. It's not a poll or a survey, but feel free to submit your comments and any observations which you might have based on today's presentation. Okay, let's move on to comments from the audience. Do we have any audience comments today?
I have one from Dan Dwyer.
Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'd like to tie into the discussion on the noise survey today is the current OMP noise contour. And I think the flaw in what is perceived by the current and prior contours is that fewer residents are impacted today than in the past. And this may actually not be correct. I think there's a fair argument that more residents are affected today, but are affected differently. And this is because there's an outdated DNL metric that's being utilized that fails to capture modern aviation noise. And as we've discussed prior, in particular, arrival noise. So the time-lapse video on the ONCC website that seems to support progress in reducing aviation noise really only tells part of the story. And while it does reflect some key advances in engine technology and aircraft design in the past, more recently, the perceived noise reduction reflects primarily this failed metric. And to address this, we really don't need to wait for more studies. Congress has the power to change the DNL threshold or the metric entirely. And I think moving forward, the ONCC should focus more of its effort in this direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. We're all aware of the Quiet Skies Caucus, which many of our federal representatives are members of. And again, we keep in close touch with them. And I think we all agree the 65 DNL is the current metric for sound insulation and things of that nature. But it doesn't tell the whole story. So Congress is going to have to appropriate a lot of funds and do a lot of things. So I'm sure this will get in line along with everything else, but it's continuous work that we'll be involved in. Any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jeanette, please take the roll and please indicate when you respond that you could also hear and participate.
Addison,
Yes and yes.
Arlington Heights,
Yes and yes.
Bartlett,
Yes and yes.
Bensonville,
Yes and yes.
Bloomingdale,
Yes, yes, and yes.
City of Chicago,
Yes, and yes.
City of Chicago 36th Ward,
Yes and yes.
Yes, and yes.
39,
Yes and yes.
41,
Yes and yes.
Des Plaines,
Yes and yes.
DuPage County,
Yes and yes.
Elmwood Park,
Yes and yes.
Franklin Park,
Yes and yes.
Glenview,
Yes and yes.
Hanover Park,
Yes and yes.
Hartwood Heights,
Yes, and yes.
Hoffman Estates,
Yes, yes.
Lincolnwood,
Yes and yes.
Mount Prospect,
Yes and yes.
Niles, Norwich,
Yes and yes.
Northlake,
Aye, aye.
Palatine,
Yes and yes.
Park Ridge,
Yes and yes.
River Forest,
Yes.
River Grove,
Yes and yes.
Rolling Meadows,
Yes and yes.
Trailer Park,
Yes and yes.
South Barrington,
Yes and yes.
St. Charles, Stone Park, Wayne, Wooddale,
Yes and yes.
School District 2, 7,
Yes and yes.
48,
Yes and yes.
59, 214,
Yes and yes.
234,
Yes and yes.
and 401.
Yes and yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you either at Tech Committee, Flag Quiet Committee, or at our next residential or our next annual meeting. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Goodbye.